said yesterday that that announcement of those phantom jobs was kind of a vindication of how I felt. And as a matter of fact, I think it's how a lot of the guests on this show have felt too, right? We just couldn't understand all these fantastic jobs numbers we were getting month over month. It's like we were all being trolled by the government. And it's the biggest case of the mostly peaceful protest I could have ever imagined, right? We can't believe what our ears and eyes are telling us. We had loads of government spending that helped to keep us out of a recession. That's really the only reason why. Now, it's almost impossible to have negative growth month over month with the amount of money that the government's been spending month over month, right? But what's really disappointing is the fact that with all that government spending, well, it was a bad deal because those economic indicators that they were making look better with all the money they were spending, we have been getting ripped off, right? Because the way I look at it is we bought 818,000 jobs that we didn't get. How about that? Those jobs weren't really there. What a waste of money that was. So now we know, and the curtain has been pulled back. What's going to happen next? Well, we've got a 75% chance of a 25 basis point cut and basically a 25% chance of a 50 basis point cut. How does the market digest those outcomes? Because it could be totally different on each one of them. My next guest has to think about this stuff on a daily basis with his investing. Please welcome back into the show, Mr. Eddie Ghabour. Eddie, thanks for being on. I feel like I got ripped off. I mean, they were trying to manipulate the market with the spending they were doing just to keep us out of a recession. But as it turns out, they didn't do that very well because we got ripped off by 818,000 jobs. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think that just goes to show. I don't think anyone can dispute the fact that this economy is slowing down. And the biggest risk to the market is that it slows down faster than many people anticipate. And look, the Fed is getting ready to start cutting rates, as we know, and that usually means that we are closer to the end of the growth cycle. Cutting rates is not bullish. They're doing that because they're starting to feel as though this economy needs some stimulus. And God knows the government has printed as much money as they can to try to keep this thing going. But at some point in time, what's ultimately going to happen is this market is going to suck everybody in because they're going to believe the soft landing narrative. But I think the big risk we're going to have is we're going to see inflation reaccelerate as we go into next year because they put themselves in an impossible position where growth is slowing, the labor market is cracking, but inflation is staying really high, which means that it's going to be very tough for them to come with aggressive rate cuts, which is what a lot of people are begging for. But I don't think they're going to get as many rate cuts as priced in.
You're so right, because a lot of folks, I've said it on this show a lot. If you can please, anybody, I'll take all your cards and letters if you can explain to me how cutting rates makes inflation go down, because it doesn't, right? And so if we're going to have to cut rates because the economy's not doing well, maybe you see inflation coming down because nobody's got a job, nobody's driving, nobody's eating. I mean, it's all over, right? But that's probably not going to be the case. So we're going to have this. You're exactly right. They've painted themselves into a corner where if they cut them to help with the situation out there on Main Street, they're going to hurt the situation that they've been trying to fight all this time with inflation. And you are exactly right. I don't care about the CPI being up 2.9%, because if you look back this time last year, it was up 3.2%. So we're up 2.9% off of last year's 3.2%. And if you keep going, we're up from 9% 2 or 3 years ago. So prices are not going down. They're still going up, maybe just at a slower pace. So those people, mom and pop on Main Street, are not getting any breaks. The economy is slowing. We've seen a lot of job losses. They don't really get reported. And I think that 818,000 phantom jobs was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me, because I have been saying, I don't care what you say anecdotally, I see this is not a good situation. Anybody that's got a good job is wanting to keep it right now because they know they can't replicate that job elsewhere. What do you say?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, once you start seeing cracks in the labor market, that's a major red flag fundamentally. And so I think no one can argue the fact that once that trend starts, it doesn't reverse itself. It takes a while. So we expect to see the labor market continue to get weaker over the coming months, the slowdown to continue to accelerate over the coming months. And look, when you talk to people on boots on the ground, you talk to families, you talk to business owners, they will tell you that they are not getting a reprieve in regards to expenses, whether it's the labor market and the wages that are hurting businesses, the cost of goods are hurting businesses, and then families. I mean, look at food, look at shelter. This narrative that they are beating inflation is just not accurate when you talk to real families that are struggling. And unfortunately, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And the setup going in the next year is going to be extremely challenging, in our opinion.
And I think the word criminal is probably too hyperbolic for me to use, But really, the situation, when I boil it all down to it, and I tell other folks outside the building here, is that they let inflation get out of control, 9.1% at the high. And all these people got all these great pay rises. And so now all your labor is making a lot more money than they used to. And you as a business are not doing well and or shutting down and or firing people. But you're going to have to see that the unemployment right now, which is at 4.3%, approach 5 or maybe go over 5 to do a reset on labor so everybody can come out from underneath this recession that looks like we're going into. Is that too simplifying it?
No, it's not. And look, at the end of the day, no one wants to admit this at the Fed, but the only way you're going to get inflation and costs down is a recession.
Yeah.
And you can try to artificially kick the can down the road by pumping money into the system, but it just makes the problem worse. And this is the predicament that we're in now. There is no good answer for getting prices down. And that answer is going to be a recession. And that will ultimately happen. Again, they can delay it, but the inevitable will happen. And we, again, think the setup for next year is going to be challenging because everyone's going to buy in that the Fed beat inflation and the soft landing. That will be the narrative because they're starting to cut rates. But again, that's the beginning of the end in regards to the cycle.
You just got to keep the focus on the fact that they're not cutting rates because things are great, right?
That's exactly right. And look, when has the Fed ever navigated a soft landing?
Never.
During these time periods? They were late to cutting. They're going to be late. They're late to raising rates. They're always late because they look at rearview mirror data versus forward-looking data like you and I do.
Right. Sometimes they're too smart for their own good. All right. Appreciate